Welcome. This is Module 14, Technology for Success. This is Digital Ethics and Lifestyle. This is going to be a very quick lecture. A lot of this is things we've already discussed, so I don't want to take up too much of your time with going over the same things over and over again. You'll find some of this in earlier modules, like Module 6, and I believe modules 1 and 2 also have some of this information as well. But as with a lot of these modules, there is repetition here. So let's just dive straight into it. So the very first thing that I want to talk about is distracted driving. This isn't something new here, but it's something that you should have already been exposed to many times. You've been told this information before, but let's very quickly go over it. So distracted driving, whether it's texting, talking on your phone, or something that takes your hands or eyes or otherwise attention off of the road, off of the wheel, this is something we want to avoid. Distracted driving, drunk driving, both about equally dangerous. So, what do you do with your phone if you're the one driving the vehicle? You want to put it away. You want to silence it, turn it off. You don't want to have the temptation to pick it up and use it. If you are using it for navigation, set your GPS before you get going and then just let it do its thing. But you might be asking, well, what if I realize, I forgot to make a very important call? Something that is absolutely essential. I can't neglect this. Pull over. Find somewhere safe to park and then use your device. Do what you gotta do before you get back on the road. Or you could have somebody else in the vehicle with you. If you have a passenger, you can have them make the call for you. The same goes with navigation. If you need some assistance with navigating, you can always have a navigator. I had an ex, his now husband, was the navigator. He never drove, so he got directions and relayed them. So, just really quickly want to go over distracted driving, make sure that we're all on the same page with that. We all know it's dangerous. We all know not to do it. So, don't do it. Now, from that, we want to get into talking about digital ethics. And before we can get into that, we need to really just get a quick understanding of just how much technology has changed our society. And again, this goes back to Tech Module 1, where we talked about the impact of digital technology. So we've got smartphones, we've got laptops, we've got tablets, we've got smart devices, IoT devices. And all of these have made work and recreation so much more convenient, so much easier. Think about it, instead of having this clipboard where mistakes are much more difficult to correct on the job site, we can now use a tablet and a stylus to draw or write or whatever we need it to do. We have laptops that can store huge amounts of information. We can have our phones on us that it's a combination: calculator, watch, stopwatch, alarm, just so many other things. You could use it as a pocket translator, unit converter. There's so many things that a smartphone can do nowadays. You look at, like, in science fiction, you have the tricorders of Star Trek, and our cell phones are turning into just that. It's crazy to think just how far these have come in the last, 20 years. And of course, we have, again, smart devices like Alexa, like your car's GPS. You have, I know some people who have smart fridges or other devices, and again, they all come back to the purpose of making things easier and also just allowing us to do things in different ways. But in doing this, we introduce ethical, moral, and legal problems with the advent of all this technology. And so that is how we get into digital citizenship and digital ethics. So, what is a digital citizen? Quite simply, a digital citizen is anyone who uses digital technology. That's you, that's me, that's your family, that's pretty much everyone on the planet right now in, most countries. So, digital citizenship encompasses the moral, ethical, legal, and productive use of technology. And how we define this, it varies from place to place. Many countries are going to have different policies or societal viewpoints. Different organizations are going to have different ethical policies and codes of conduct. And wherever you are, it's beneficial to know these guidelines. Say you're working for a company and they have their own digital code of ethics. You want to check their code of conduct for that information so that you know to stay within it. And then where law and ethical policies have not yet touched, we of course have to fall back on our own morals. What is societally accepted? What do we believe is right or wrong? And we have to apply these in just the same way that we would apply them outside of technology. We have to apply them to the digital technology ecosystem. It really ultimately ends up being the same principle. If you don't understand how to apply your morals to something in digital technology, begin by asking yourself, if tech was not involved in this, how would this apply? And then you can build up from there, work in the different aspects of tech and how they affect the scenario. So I've been throwing around legal, moral, ethical, and sometimes we use these words interchangeably, but they are not one and the same. So law is the rules and standards set forth by government. So, state codes, federal laws, things like that. Those are your laws. Those do not encompass ethics or morals. Ethics are societal and organizational standards. This is what we have agreed upon as people, not within the realm of the law, but maybe contained within what is allowed by the law. We have ethics. We have what we are able to do based on standards we've agreed to. And then finally, we have morals. These are our own personal convictions. What do we believe is right and wrong? And we have to find a suitable point in the middle of all three of these where we are doing our best to minimize harm to ourselves, to our neighbor, to our friends, family, whoever else you can think of. And that is the purpose of digital ethics. That is the purpose of ethics in general. So let's quickly talk about the digital divide. Technology has developed at an incredibly fast rate. However, it is not developed at the same rate for everyone. Not everybody has the same access to the same technology. Some regions, even here in the U.S., even here in the state of Alabama, do not have access to broadband internet, just as an example. And so this creates the digital divide. And this is this gap in access that puts these people at a disadvantage in an increasingly technology-driven world. And there are measures being put into place to attempt to reduce this divide, but it is proving difficult. Whether in school, work, or just home. It's a constant issue that we have been facing for decades, and it's not getting any easier to deal with as new technologies become available. Jumping from that, we now need to talk about intellectual property. Intellectual property is any creative work. It could be art, music, it could be photography, film, anything that you have created by your own hands. And so we have laws in place to protect people who have created these things and the product itself. Among them is copyright. If you are a content creator, you are going to run into copyright every which way you look. How do we use creative works in a way that is fair, in a way that is legal, and again, ethical. And we have a few different legal protections and standards to help us make these decisions. Firstly, we have public domain, and this essentially means it is free to use without permission, without royalty. Generally speaking, you should still be giving credit to the original creator, but you're not required to obtain any sort of permission or pay any fees of any kind. From there, we have Creative Commons, and this is a nonprofit organization that has put forth a number of easy-to-use licensing terms for creators to use. Oftentimes, if you look at content on sites such as YouTube, you're going to find that things that don't use the YouTube standard license are going to use Creative Commons. Next, we have fair use. This is a doctrine that sets out how we can use other people's work in a way that is not detrimental to them. So, say you're using it in an educational setting, or you're doing something transformative like a parody, or you're only using so much of it. This is a more gray area within fair use doctrine, but there have been court cases where, say, a 20-second clip has been deemed fair use out of, say, a 4 or 5 minute song. And there's a whole lot more to copyright than what we see here. It's a very complex set of rules and regulations, and it can take years just to learn all of it. There are lawyers whose entire career is focused on copyright. And I want to take a moment to distinguish copyright from trademark. Copyright is intended to protect the work itself. So, say you've written a novel. Copyright law is there to protect that novel. Whereas trademark protects identifiers, such as titles, logos, and things like that. So, if you've created something with an original title, something that is not, it can't be come up with on pure accident very easily. So something like Star Wars, that's trademarked. That title is trademarked. It is owned by Disney. And so that is your distinction between copyright and trademark. The actual work is copyrighted, whatever the past tense is. Trademark are titles, logos, those are trademarked. All right, being a responsible digital citizen. Again, this is, identify best practices, understand the laws, develop digital literacy. We're going to, in order to know how to use technology properly, we first need to understand how to use it in general. So, going on from that, some guidelines for being a responsible digital citizen, and these are going to vary based on your environment. Where are you? Are you at work? Are you at school? Are you just in your own personal life? I'm not going to go through all of these because they can vary from place to place. If you're just talking amongst your friends, you don't necessarily need to worry about spelling and grammar. You don't necessarily need to worry about your choice of language. That's all about reading the room. Are you okay with that language? Is the person you're talking to okay with it? But if you're in a professional setting, these are guidelines you should probably stick more closely to. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is identifying reliable sources. These slides state that using wikis is generally not a good idea. This is somewhat of an outdated philosophy. Using wikis or Wikipedia is a lazy way of going about finding sources. It's a good starting point, but that's how you should You should use things like Wikipedia to find sources, not to use as a reference in and of itself. Because any decently well-written Wikipedia page, number one, is not going to have any of those great big obvious flags at the top saying, hey, there's a problem with this article. And at the same time, you're going to see a long list of references at the bottom that you can use in your own work. And that is what you should be really referencing. You can find library sources, you can find scholarly articles, you can find journals, so on and so forth. This is something that is talked about in other lectures, other modules. As well as the CARS method for verifying a source. That is the source credible? Who is the author? Do they have a reputation within this field of study, or are they just some random schmo talking about it because they feel like it? Is it accurate? Is the information presented the facts? Are they checked? Do they have their information straight, basically? Reasonable. Are claims being made sensible? Are they in proportion to the information being presented? Is it some wild conspiracy theory? You should probably think twice about using it. And finally, support. What kind of sources does this article have? Who wrote the sources that this article is using? And from there, you go through the CARS model again with the sources of your sources. And so from here, we get into a bunch of things that we've already covered, things that you should already know by now. The ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, is one thing that I think bears repeating. And I'm just going to quickly put this up here. This shows a collection of standards to follow when creating content that is accessible to people with disabilities. Be mindful of things like color contrast, of captioning, of font sizes. Make sure everything stands out from everything else. Make the page or whatever you're making relatively easy to navigate for somebody who might be visually impaired, or make your content suitable for hearing impaired. The list goes on. Like I said, just look at these here, consider them, especially if content creation is something you are interested in. And I'm just going to breeze through these. I'm not really going to talk about them. These are things we've already talked about. Health risks, safe disposal of technology, developing a wellness plan, knowing to take breaks, doing things of that nature to protect yourself. I'm trying not to spend too much time dwelling on things that we've already covered. These last few slides are all to do with things that were covered in Type Module 6. So I'm just going to end this here. I know I kind of just rushed this, but again, I don't want to repeat myself too much. So that's going to end this lecture. If you have questions, of course, you know how to reach me. Otherwise, good luck with your assignments.